Are we gonna get credits? We're gonna get credits, right? Yes! Yes! Alright, we did it. We did it. Alright, so first things first, the bottom center of the screen says that we've beaten 108 games this year. And 430 since we started doing this in 2020. We've now beaten 109 games in 2023, and 431 since we started doing this in 2020. Thank Christ. Alright, yeah, so I have thoughts. Let's start here. I have heard that by many accounts, this is the greatest video game of all time. If I'm looking with my objective eyes, which I'm usually not when evaluating a game, I can absolutely understand. There was no game like this before this game came along, and there really hasn't been anything really since. It is a singular, transcendent video game that blazed a trail for video games that never would have been blazed quite that way had this game never come along. I totally understand that. I get it. I think this is the video game landscape is a much sadder and very, very different place if this game had never come about. So let's start there and give some respect where it's due. I totally get it. Now, as far as like what I enjoyed, what did I enjoy? I think that the idea of the open world so early is really cool. Just being able to wander around and look and check things and come upon. It's like Elden Ring in the early 90s. You can just wander in a direction and get into some crazy hijinks and discover items and find hidden areas and, you know, all kinds of meet interesting people and find weird enemies, and just by wandering in any direction. That's cool. That is genuinely cool, objectively or subjectively. That's awesome. The fact that it was able to do that kind of, they were able to make a game that could do that in 1991 is insane, or 92, whatever year. It's insane. It's insane. The boss fights were fun. Really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed a lot of them. The boss fights were probably personally my favorite part of the game, but that's usually my favorite part of any game that has bosses in it. But yeah, I thought the boss fights were good. I thought they were well thought out. They were interesting. You had to use different kinds of ideas to get around certain things. That was a lot of fun. What is this? I don't even want to know. The last thing that I think I will say I really enjoyed is when you get the map in the dungeons and you're just going room by room methodically trying to find everything in every dungeon. That scratched a similar itch to me that like survival horror games, like old school survival horror games do, where you're just like, okay, this is the map. I'm just going room to room, making sure everything's explored and I've gotten all the items, and I really, really enjoyed that at times, especially in the earlier dungeons when they weren't so oppressive. Total games played 23. What the fuck does that mean? Oh, is that how many times it thinks I died? Because I died a lot more than that. I just didn't load most of the time. I just loaded from the save most of the time. Anyway, so I really enjoyed like exploring the dungeons, especially earlier when they weren't so like oppressively difficult. So all that was great. And on top of that, I think it's a big improvement on the first two games. I liked the first game, but this one is way better. It's more intuitive. They got rid of the finite lives. Obviously the graphical improvements are insane. It's just a crazy jump that these games are only, what are they? From the second game to this is like 3 or 4 years. And this game is like, it's a whole different universe. So obviously that's all great. The items, how they can be used, all the things that they took the original formula. The original game kind of forgot that the second game existed, and took that original formula and turned it into something that is just like beyond awesome, comparatively. It's obviously a huge improvement on the first game. Issues. I don't have a lot of objective issues. As a game that is regarded by many as the best game of all time, or even by most as at least top 5 games of all time, I'm not going to sit here and say, like, I think this was poorly done. There's not really. I'll see if I can come up with something, but actually, I think I might have something. But subjectively, fun-wise, this game about halfway through takes a really dark turn. It's very difficult. I would never, ever, ever have even attempted getting past the halfway point in this game without some spam saving. That's just the only way I'm ever going to see the end of a game like this. Some of the dungeons are, I would actually go as far as to say, unreasonably difficult. Like, it's pretty forgiving with the fact that you can start at the beginning of a dungeon instead of just like starting the game over like you do in the second Zelda game. But I do think that I do wonder where the developers get off deciding they're going to make it that hard. I'll go as far as to say this. I think that if they had made the game a little bit more reasonable in the difficulty department, it would have made it a better game. Is that crazy to say? Is that crazy? I think actually there is a way that you could improve The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, and I think that the way to do that is not to make those dungeons so incredibly punishing. Now, I absolutely see the argument to counter to that, but I'm going to go ahead and say that that's the way that I feel. I got frustrated with the end, realizing that I didn't have the weapon that I needed, and I had to do a bunch of side errands right at the end before I could beat the final boss. That was highly annoying. It's a byproduct of the way that I play games, because most people at this point in the game, they would have left no stone unturned and they would have figured everything out. I mean, I saw those blacksmiths and I was like, yeah, if I stumble upon how to get my weapon improved, I'll follow through with it, but otherwise I'm just going to keep moving. And so, that's on me. But at the end of the day, it did have an effect on how much I enjoyed the game, having to go through a bunch of tedious side missions at the very end of the game, mid-final boss, like between final boss phases. I like that they gave you that option. That's nice, because otherwise I would have been locked out entirely and I would have had to give up. But it was still a little bit annoying that I had to like upgrade my sword and my arrows and all that stuff. That's really it. As far as like critiques, I mean, really the only other reason this game is not going to rank in the top 100, and it absolutely won't, is because it's a product of its time and it didn't wow me as much as some of the more recent games. I am definitely one of those people. There are a lot of people my age, 40 plus, that these games from this period are their favorite video games. And they don't think anything from this era compares. And I feel completely the opposite. I think that 95% of the best video games of all time, even objectively, have come out in the last 6 years. So, it's when you start talking about like how influential games are and how they've changed the industry, that's a different thing. But I just don't like looking at video games that way. I really feel like anyone who is enjoying this game more than like the God of War reboot, it's 100% nostalgia fueled. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with nostalgia. But because I'm not looking at games objectively when I'm ranking them, so, do whatever you want to. No judgment from me, but that's just not the way that I see these games. Even the games that I do feel nostalgia for, Like when I went back and played Donkey Kong Country 2, that was a game that, oh no, not that one. There have been a few games that I had picked up. This was one of them. I had picked this game up for, I don't know how long. Not long, because I never got past, I don't even think, the first dungeon. But I felt what that nostalgia is, you know, when I picked this game up again, and I went and started swinging my sword for the first time. But it just doesn't have the effect on me that it seems to for most people my age. So it just doesn't matter that much to me. It doesn't make me that happy. It's far outweighed by how cumbersome some of these older games are. And this game is better than most from this era, but especially for the type of game that it is. But it's still, like, it's so much easier to play the newer games. And yeah, like there would have been a much greater sense of achievement if I had beaten this game without spam saving. But at what cost? At what cost? This would have taken me a month to beat. I mean, literally, if I had played this game as a kid, there were games that I played as a kid that I would pick up every month or so and play for a couple hours, and I just never beat, and I never got past the second castle or whatever because they were just so hard. And I remember Ninja Gaiden. The first Ninja Gaiden was that way. I started Ninja Gaiden when I was a kid. I don't know, 150 times. Never got past the third boss because it was so hard. So I'm glad that I have options like Switch gives me with these games where I can go back and play them and I can just spam save the hell out of them. Because that's the only way I'd ever see the end. It's the only way. So, at this point, we're not really talking about this game anymore. We're talking about older games in general. But I think when you have that conversation, this is the epitome of that kind of game. Because it's the very best representation of games from the early 90s. It is the best. It's up there. It's among the best. And again, I recognize that and I appreciate it. And I appreciate what this game has done and this series has done for the industry. It just wouldn't be what it did. That God of War reboot I was talking about a minute ago would not have existed in the way that it did if this game hadn't blazed that trail. And I give all props for that, all full due respect. But when I rank this game based on how much fun I had, it's just not going to compare to the God of War reboot. I just... maybe part of it is preference. I just prefer a more intuitive, easier, not easier necessarily because, well, no, even the toughest Souls-like is easier than this, for sure. So yeah, I guess ease of use is part of it. So this game, when I think about other Zelda games, yes, this game is going to far outrank the first one. Is it going to outrank the first Mario game? I don't know. Maybe. I'll have to think about it. But that's why it's not going to be top 100, and I'm not going to put it in, best game of all time territory where most people do, because I don't rank games objectively. If I were thinking like objectively the most important games, see, I feel like people conflate those. Like when they're thinking like, what's the best video game of all time? They immediately think of like, what's the most important? I just don't see it that way. I think there are games that are incredibly important that aren't that fun. So, it's just, like, it's just, I don't know. I just don't see it that way. So, this is undoubtedly an incredibly important game. And it sure was fun at times, for sure. It's just not going to rank as high as most of the current games that I just feel like games are getting better every year. I mean, 2023, if I was alone on a desert island and I could only pick 1 year from which to play video games for the rest of my life, 2023 would be that year with a bullet. Not only do I have, I think, some of the best games ever made, but I've got so many. If I pick 1992, what do I get from that? 50 games? Maybe? Shit. there have been 50 games that have come out in the last 2 months. So, anyway, I digress a little bit. I really did enjoy the game. I'm glad I'm never gonna have to play it again. On that note, this would be the point in the video where I would normally say, Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past. It's been fun. Here, I'm going to create a suspend point. It's been fun. We had great time, but we're now going to delete you from our console and never play you again. But since we're playing on Switch, I'm not going to delete this. There's no need. I don't even know if it's possible. We're just going to say, Zelda: Link to the Past. It's been fun, and we bid you adieu. Bye.